Hey Jay,
Ronnie?
watching. Yeah, I knew a few days ago that we were going to do this interview, and I was thinking about something I wanted to do that I kind of usually do is sound checks. So it's called Opera Va, which is a bebop song. I think it was Charlie Parker back in the 40s or 50s, and it's just one of those bebop songs, a little swing thing. It goes like this. I'm going to try to scat the melody.
Absolutely.
Melody is debo debo ben debo bo bidum da ba bidum debo bip bip ba ba bip ba da ba yadum ba ba da ba da ba ba da bidum bidum da bidum debo da ba 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 da yadum da ba.
Folks, welcome to Suspect Studios here in San Jose, California, and we're back with a dear friend of the program and a heck of a human being and a pretty good musician in his own right, Ronnie Beck.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Welcome back, baby.
What's up, Jake Feinberg?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm just trying to let the dust settle a little bit. I'm moving and debating whether to stay in the Bay Area or move to Las Vegas.
That almost seems like I couldn't even believe that you would consider leaving the Bay Area.
Well, the Bay Area cost of living is sky high, and I moved here in the early 70s, man, where it was reasonable, and nowadays it's so expensive, and all the high tech here is just really pricing a lot of people out of the Bay Area, man. It's kind of sad.
If you went to Vegas, what would be your ideal kind of gigs? I mean, would you want to play top 40? I mean, what would you want to do if you move? I know it's cheaper. I mean, Carlos Santana bought a house there just to save on on tax, just to save money. He's got obviously a residency at the House of Blues there, but what would you want to be doing there?
I'd probably focus more on teaching and recording in my home. I could set up my studio there, and I like doing that. That's kind of my favorite thing to do now, is just to create music and record it. In fact, I have 4 songs right now that I'm waiting to finish, and I just haven't had the opportunity because there's just so much going on with moving out of my house, downsizing, getting storage, because I had 40 years worth of stuff that I needed to relocate, and trying to sell stuff, and just kind of, my wife and I just really downsizing.
Well, I mean, one of the things, now you have more stuff because we have this record, John Lee Hooker, Kabuki Wookie.
That's so crazy. I didn't even know about that.
Right, but I wanted to start actually by asking you if you could. A lot of people don't know. I mean, you are a serious rhythmist, but sometimes you have another drummer when you're in your band.
In my band,
and when you get up and you want to sing, can you sing a tune for the audience right now?
I need a keyboard or a guitar or something, man. I have no tone center.
No tonal center. Well, I don't think that's ever stopped you before.
Well, you kind of hinted around to Grandma's Hands, which is written by one of my favorite songwriters and favorite people. Even though he and I don't talk anymore, I mean, I have a real love for him. Bill Withers, great songwriter. He was revolutionary back in the 70s, man. The way he was doing it was so very different from what the rest of the R&B that was happening at that time period. And Bill, he said, man, I don't want a bunch of horns and a bunch of stuff on there. I just want it to be raw and he absolutely did that. And he always had, the one thing he did do in his recordings, he would have some really wonderful string arrangements, just some very just tasty string arrangements to his stuff. And
but there was no brass though. He didn't want brass.
He didn't use. I can't recall any of his songs having horns on there. I don't think so. He may have. I don't know. But everybody's covered his material, man. And I've heard like the song we're gonna do, Grandma's Hands, man. I heard a few years ago. I heard this kind of a country version of the song, and it cracked me up. I was, oh my God, I want to Bill heard it because it was. I don't remember who the artist was, but it was so different. It was a country version of a Bill Withers song, and I laughed.
Right. Well, I mean, I was just down with Gadsden, the Honorable James Gadsden in South Central, right. and Kissing My Love and Use Me.
Yeah.
Both of those tunes, Bill had them, or in one of them, it was more of a shuffle beat, and it was Gadsden who came up with the rhythm.
Well, James was an integral part of that whole song, because Bill had a serious rhythm section there, man. He had James Gadsden. I don't remember who the bass player and the other guitar player were and the keyboard player, but man, they when they recorded, they always found these amazing grooves, and everybody found these really tasty, cool parts, man. And it was just like, you didn't really need any. You didn't need a bunch of horns and all that stuff. It was covered in the rhythm section, man. And that's kind of my approach that I take to the stuff that I record now, man. I like to build it from the rhythm section. And then I've used synth horns. One song I'm working on now, I am gonna have to get a horn section, but most of the stuff I do, man, is just because I'm a rhythm section guy.
I guess, Mike, yeah. But before we hear your pipes, I just wonder about how many grooves you created for songs in the studio.
Well, that wasn't really my style or my approach, man. There's guys like James Gadsden, David Garibaldi, guys that J.R. John Robinson. I mean, a lot of it, and I would say I was closer to J.R. John Robinson because it was just a pocket thing. They wanted that solid pocket and just minimal fills and stuff, but very tasty. Undugu was like that too. On the other hand, there was guys like David Garibaldi and James Gadsden who had signature drum parts. And there's guys like that. What's the name? I was just listening to Jose Pasillas from, what's the name of the group? I can't think of the name.
You know what it was like? I mean, they were at a Holiday. Bill Withers was at a Holiday Inn in Seattle, and they were working. I think it was Use Me, and I mean, all it was Bill. Was James just starting a different feel, and Bill's like, I like that. and then he integrated it into the tune. It wasn't like Bill was like, hey, you know, find a groove for this, and that's where the rhythm came from. Was there ever, in your experience in the studios, or even just like on the road, where you're like working out a groove and you changed the rhythm of a tune and it wound up being recorded?
That has happened in the studio. I did some recording back in the 80s, but a lot of that was happening. We were recording a lot at Fantasy up in Berkeley. And it was for Harvey Fuqua and a guy named Greg Crockett, man. They were doing 2 Tons of Fun, Sylvester.
Greg Crockett, man, that is unbelievable.
Yeah,
and Fuqua, yeah.
Well, Greg is a guitar player and a bass player, and as a bass player, he always had an idea of what he wanted the drums to play, and he'd have me play some really strange stuff. To me, it would be strange. I said, man, is that what you want? But the reason he would call me, man, is because I could buy into his concept and what he was trying to do, and I would be able to play these obscure, strange beats that he wanted me to play, but make them feel good. And that was kind of the challenge for that whole approach. But once you heard everything come together and you heard the bass line and the guitar part that he was hearing, and then the drum part made sense. I said, oh, I see what you're doing. Okay, I got it now, I got it. But it would be different. But it was always very, very creative, very well done. Greg's a really good producer and a good songwriter. I really like working with him a lot.
With working with Colt Clifford, and I mean in the studio when Ed Michelle got you guys together, how would those sessions work? I mean, you weren't overdubbing, you weren't putting all the pieces together. You were hitting at one time.
Well, yeah, a lot of those were just like they call head arrangements, where we'd make stuff up in the studio. We'd figure out what to do on the spot, and that's actually a really good way to record. That's kind of what Bill was doing. Cop a groove, and once you find it, okay, hit play, hit record, let's go. That spontaneous thing, that right in the moment, and that's what made a lot of hit records. Matter of fact, War.
Harold Brown.
Most of their records were. I just saw Harold Brown last weekend.
Bless you, Harold. He's tuning into this.
A lot of those records, man, they were going to the studio, man, and they'd be in the studio. They'd lock out the studio for a month and just groove and try stuff until they found something that worked, and they write lyrics to it, and next thing you know, it's a hit record. A lot of War's hits were done exactly that way. Just find a groove. Yeah, I like that. Okay, let's work with that. Okay, let's put a bridge in it. You know, just on the spot. And it makes really fresh, innovative music. A lot of groups did that, man. Ohio Players did that. Versus Earth, Wind & Fire, who Maurice and those guys, there was some serious thought that went into what they were doing. But there were other guys in that era, in the 70s, that were making records, and it was all spontaneous. And that's why they were hits, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the Jake Feinberg show is completely spontaneous, organic. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Is
right.
it spontaneous?
Very spontaneous, and so yeah, I would love to hear you sing.
All right. I think I want to do a Johnny Taylor song instead.
Sounds great.
It's called Last $2.
Dig. I mean, I wanted to ask you, can you talk about why you wound up in L.A. on that night when John Lee said, "Hey, boy, what do you play?" And you said, "I play drums." And he said, "Well, you want to come up and play?" And I'm thinking to myself, well, did Ron just stumble into that place? I mean, how did you wind up? Because I feel like you were there to check out John Lee, and maybe I just like you to talk to the audience about the history there, because you didn't live in L.A.
No, I was a Bay Area guy. Actually,
Like Omaha guy, but
Omaha guy, transplanted in San Jose. But I was hanging out with Clifford Coulter. You know, when Clifford and I first met in 1970, 71, we hung out for 3 days straight the first time we met. You know, because I'd heard about him and I'd heard his records and stuff that he did on Impulse. And I was like, wow, I got to meet this guy, man. This guy's hot, you know. And Cliff was hanging out with Mel Brown and those guys. So Cliff was going to...
project out a little bit, like your voice, a little bit louder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Clifford was going to L.A. to do a session with John Lee Hooker, and he asked me if I wanted to go. You know, and I bought my own ticket. You could buy a ticket back then for $25 to get to L.A.
Oh, I love it. Clifford was playing guitar or B3 or organ.
Both. He played guitar. Actually, he played some guitar on B.B. King records, and he was playing keyboards on the John Lee stuff. And yeah, actually, B.B. was much cooler with Clifford playing guitar than John Lee was. And
So you bought your ticket.
I was just hanging out. Went to the studio with him, hanging out, you know, smoking cigarettes and drinking beer and chit-chatting and meeting people and meeting the LA guys, you know, just trying to get my name out there. And then John Lee asked me, he said, "Ben, what do you play?" I said, "I play drums." He said, "Well, you want to play?" I said, "Yeah." So I ended up playing on that album. I think it was Free Beer and Chicken.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
That one, and then we did another one where Wawa Watson was playing guitar on the session, and that session actually was in San Francisco, and Wawa had come up from L.A. and he took over the set. He took over the session. Wawa said, "Okay, you mind if I do something?" And John Lee said, "Yeah, all right, go ahead." And Wawa started passing out parts. He said, "Drummer, man, give me a beat." So I just laid that beat, and he said, "Okay, yeah, right there, stay right there." And he started playing this ridiculous guitar part. Then the bass player joined. The next thing I know, man, it was like, I think it was on Bumblebee or something like that.
I'm gonna look it up because I'd never heard that there was a collaboration between Wawa and John Lee.
It was great, man, and it was funk, man. We was playing funk because John was a blues guy, and we were putting some funk on the blues. So, and I was a kid. I was all about the funk. I was listening to James Brown. So let's stick some James Brown and some blues, because James did some blues. He just did it funky. You know, Papa Got a Brand New Bag is a blues. Okay, Out of Sight is a blues. And there are a lot of songs that were blues songs because all of it came from the blues anyway, man. But they put the funk on it, put a backbeat on it, and kids were dancing to it, you know. And that was it. But yeah, that was a cool session, man. Wawa was passing out parts, man, and John Lee let him go. John Lee was really cool that way. Another time we're in L.A. and John Lee's session, and what's his name was it? Joe Cocker was hanging out.
The man.
Joe had a can of Budweiser in one hand and some Ambassador Scotch in the other.
Oh, mixing and matching there.
And it was great. Yeah. And I was looking at, and this cat, man, he was just this spastic, just this thing that was so fucking, excuse me, soulful. And I was like, man, look at this cat, man. And then John Lee said, "Come on, man." And he says, "Okay, Joe, go." And Joe started singing, man. And I was like, whoa, this is, you know, that was like, I got a chance to see that kind of history. I mean, Joe Cocker, come on, man.
Well, not only that, I mean, in today's world, in a recording session, the drum chair is not going to be open for somebody unless Coulter, someone's tipping Hooker off to say, "Hey, I'm bringing my man down."
Well,
I'm surprised that there was no drummer there, and all of a sudden.
There was John Lee's drummer was there, Ken Swank, the guy.
Ken Swank, yeah.
That was John Lee's drummer, and actually there were some things because Ken really understood how to play with John Lee, because John Lee stuff wasn't real structured. He would change whenever.
Tempo changes, and
not so much tempo changes, but just section changes. Like he would do a verse, and then he'd go to the chorus and but it wasn't an even thing. It would be like an odd places. And
It wasn't linear, yeah.
it was not linear, thank you. And I had a problem with that because I said, man, it had to be structured for me. I can't get it. I don't understand it. It doesn't fit. That didn't work.
Right.
So, and Ken was really cool. He said, man, go ahead and play. So, and it was at a time, too, where it was a hang. So everybody was in the studio hanging out, and there was no egos and no competition. It was just cats getting together playing because we all celebrated each other, celebrated each other's talent, and we all respected each other, and we all got paid.
Right. Well, that was the incentive. You knew that you were being paid.
We all were going to get paid.
You were going to get paid.
It didn't matter.
How did it work, though? You were just coming to catch the hang, but then you wound up on those tunes, so you got paid. I mean, that was...
And then, because then they could hear I could play. They said, oh, this boy can play. And then they called me. Hey, man, bring Ronnie with you again. I said, okay, cool. So I was getting my name around. I mean, I'd just come to California from Omaha, and, man, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, like, to get to hang in L.A., where were we recording it? Cherokee, or one of those famous studios in L.A., man, where everybody recorded, man. And I was like this kid, and I'm hanging out. Another time we were in L.A., Plas Johnson was there.
Oh, great horn player.
Who else was there? It was on a Clifford Coulter session, man. It was all of these. Sweets Edison was there playing first trumpet. John Turk was there playing second trumpet. I mean, Willie Ruff was there playing French horn. And I mean, all these L.A. first call musicians.
Serious studio cats were there.
The guys.
Plas Johnson, Willie Ruff on French horn.
Yeah.
Ronnie Beck at about, what, 18?
18. In fact, Sweets got on my ass, Sweets, because I was back there messing around, and there was a song, Clifford had written a drum solo into the arrangement. And it was like 16 bars, and I think I went 18 bars. And Sweet said, God damn it, get it together.
No, but I mean, they weren't saying you get off the bandstand.
He was saying pay attention, because Sweets was like, in fact, Sweets was playing with the Merv Griffin band in the evening at 5 o'clock. He had to go to the TV studio to record that. So I mean, cats was making money, man. But Sweets, they called him Sweets because Sweets cussed a lot, and he got in my ass. God damn it, you back there. Get that shit together.
Get it together. It's 16.
I ain't got all day. I got to go, I mean, you know.
Right. He was doing 4 sessions a day.
Exactly.
And but he also, but he knew you could play. He just said, get it together. You know, the one thing I wanted to ask you about, because you play in your church, you play in the church in, I think, Palo Alto now.
That's right.
Were you playing gospel? I mean, I know you and your mom was a big influence, but were you playing in gospel settings in Omaha?
No.
So how did you because, I mean, you love funk music, and part of funk came out of the church. I mean, it came out of the Sanctified Church. And so I'm trying to figure out when you first got into playing in a gospel setting.
Actually, it was in 1999. I went to San Francisco, and I was playing at Glide United Methodist Memorial Church.
The great Reverend Cecil Williams.
That's right. Cecil.
Serving all those beautiful people that need food.
Man, it was an amazing thing that he was doing right there in the Tenderloin, in the heart of the ghetto in San Francisco, man. People stand in line to get fed and stuff, and that was a lesson. And that whole environment, man, just to really take it down to the base ground level. And it's like, okay, we're doing stuff in the community. And he got a lot of recognition for that, man. All the politicians and Oprah Winfrey, Bill Cosby, Sharon Stone, Robin Williams, all of these people were coming through the church, and it was kind of a quasi-gospel setting. It wasn't a real gospel thing. It was more, the band was more jazz cats, R&B cats in the band, so some of them had played in the church. You know, a lot of the great gospel players came out of the Holiness Church, which is the Church of God in Christ. And I went to a Holiness Church in the 80s, and it scared me.
Why?
Because I didn't know what they were doing. I didn't know, I had never seen people...
The Holy Rollers.
Emote and the Spirit take hold of people like that and actually see it up close and personal, man. And it scared me at first, and then I said, oh, wow. And then I kind of got it, and I was like, oh, man, this is deep. And it changed my life. It really did.
Yeah.
I never did really, though, play in a gospel setting as a kid. We were Baptists, but we grew up in a Christian Science church. And there was no music there. They had a singer, and sometimes a keyboard player, but usually it was this lady up there singing, "Onward, Christian soldiers marching out." I mean, it was.
Turn it. Yep. That's not gonna get me off. You know.
It wasn't no funk in that.
but you talk about these obscure grooves that we were talking before about Fuqua and those guys that they were asking you to do, and you're like, is this really what you want me to play?
I didn't really question it.
No, what I'm saying is, but you were playing that stuff in the '60s when soul jazz. You were playing. That's what we talked about in our first radio interview. Was the idea that I asked you what was the most free setting you played in, and you said it was back in Omaha when you were listening to Jimmy Smith and Larry Young.
Larry Young, Big John Patton, Grant Green, Eddie Harris. It was like there was in the '60s, in the late '60s, there was a transition from straight ahead jazz to funk, and they call it soul jazz.
Called it boogaloo at the time.
Well, boogaloo was kind of its own thing, but they did call it that.
I know.
But it was a transition from the jazz to the which ended up becoming soul jazz and smooth jazz and what they have now, man. And in fact, smooth jazz is more influenced by hip hop, if anything. They started using the drum machine and programming those kind of hip hop beats and then playing instrumental music on top of it, and so they called it smooth jazz, and that has become its thing. At any rate, we used to call it in the '60s rock jazz.
Or jazz rock.
Rock jazz.
Rock jazz, yeah.
Okay. And it became soul jazz. But for us, it was just the transition from straight ahead swing to a backbeat. Because as we spoke of last time, the backbeat in jazz is taboo. But then all of a sudden people in the clubs, especially, man, that was something that kind of I got to experience too, man, is seeing the effect of putting a backbeat on some jazz and how it would affect the audience. And it kind of gave them something to grab a hold to. Because people would, oh, there it is, there's the backbeat. So that backbeat in jazz was kind of for the people. You could dance to it now. And there was a backbeat in jazz. I mean, in big band jazz, there was straight up backbeat in there. And there was dance music. Big band era, that was all about dance music, man. So.
Well, this is what a lot of cats need to realize is that you were cooking the groove at the Fox with the legendary John Turk and 5 nights a week, and there were chicks everywhere dancing. I mean, this was you were in the heyday of the funk, and it was all dance music.
Yeah, it was just like Soul Train, man. We had Soul Train going on at the gig at the club. I mean, it was dance contest and the whole thing, man. Just like on TV, Don Cornelius put it on TV, but it was already happening in the black nightclubs in LA and San Francisco, especially in Oakland, and even in San Jose. But Oakland was kind of the hotbed for that kind of thing, for the R&B stuff.
Are you able to demonstrate the Turk bump?
The Turk bump.
Because what you keep saying about him is that it was all about the groove with John, even though John was
okay, the Turk bump was actually a head movement.
Yeah.
And Gaylord Birch used to come to the gig and check us out because he'd be, like on Sundays, because he'd be in town. And man, you'd look around and the whole club was, because that was the Turk bump.
I love it, man.
John would be right there, so you knew where the groove was at. And you look around the club and everybody in the club was doing the Turk bump. And Gaylord was sitting over there, yeah! Because it was rocking, man. The funk was deep, it was smelly. Okay? But you could see it, you could feel it, you could taste it, you could touch it. The whole room, man, it was like everybody was right there in the pocket, in the cut, as they used to call it. Yeah.
Can we, would you mind just playing a little bit of that, like once you found the groove with the Turk bump, can you play a little bit of that cooking that grease and what that's like? Because I mean, that's where it's all about.
thing that I learned from John was because for me, I was trying to play a lot. And John would turn around, Beck, backbeat. Very direct. Backbeat, give me the backbeat. So what I learned to do was play all the little slick in-between stuff that I wanted to do, but give him the backbeat. And I got away with it. I thought, and it was a test for me, it was an experiment. So okay, I want to play this other stuff, but he wants the backbeat, so let me see if I can incorporate the two. And that's...
Well, that's what you talked about, and that's what I want you to talk to younger cats about, because what you just played with those, a lot of fills, there's a lot going on there. It's discipline. It's because once you have the chops, you can play anything. But then when you scale it down, it's how did you develop the discipline on the bandstand? Is that the only place you can develop that? Can you really develop it?
Well, yeah, that's what they want when you go in the studio. They don't want all that. Sometimes they do, depending on what kind of music you're playing. But if you're going and doing a regular session, an R&B session or a pop session, they want the backbeat. They want simple. And then the guys like Steve Gadd and those guys, they learn how to do some slick stuff in between.
Painting, colors,
exactly.
Without losing the groove.
There you go.
But I want you to. But didn't that discipline come from relentless bandstand experience? We've obviously done this dance before.
I would agree with
but you
that.
can't do that in your room on your own. You can't. Can you discipline yourself in your room, or can you? Is it only in a live context with people that are going to tell you, Beck, too much. Stop feeding me. The record's not going to talk to you.
Yeah, and you're right, Jake. You're right. It has to be in a collective. Because when you're in a room by yourself and you got the headphones on and you're listening to this and that, and you're basically just practicing and soloing and learning chops, developing your chops within a time frame, within a structured setting. But to learn how to groove, that comes from playing with other people, man, especially for drummers, bass players, and guitar players. I love playing with the bass player, and I also, the in-between stuff that I want to do, I'm getting it from the guitar player, because he's going to so I can do all that in-between stuff. And like David Garibaldi, for example, his thing, all the anticipations and the accent and stuff came from the guitar. Like Bruce Conti and Willie Fulton and those guys, they were playing these rhythmic things, and so David's locking with Rocco on the bass, and that usually comes from the bass drum. And then he was doing all this in-between stuff with the guitar and with Chester, the keyboard player. And then Greg Adams would arrange the horns to that. Because I never figured, I used to listen to Tower of Power. And I asked Greg one time, I said, man, how does David play all those accents, man, with the horns like that? And then Greg said, oh man, I arranged the horns to his drums. And Fred Wesley told me the same thing. He said, yeah, man, as an arranger, I listen to what the drummer's playing, and I'll arrange to that. And it was an epiphany for me, because I was saying, man, how the hell are these guys getting all these horn hits and shit within the drum beat? And the arrangement was built from the drums.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So even those James Brown sessions, chances
Absolutely.
are Wesley was writing off the drum.
Yeah.
We just lost Jabo Starks.
Clyde Stubblefield.
And Clyde as well. What was
I
the?
got to meet Clyde too. The year before last, and he was an old guy, man. His hand was hurt and stuff, and it was like a kind of a clinic for him, man. And they invited us up to play, and I showed out. I was showing him off my chops and stuff, and Clyde looked at me like, "Yeah, boy, you still can play." And I was like, and I said, if Clyde Stubblefield's giving me the thumbs up, I'm okay. I think I've been validated, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Well,
Really beautiful cat, though, man. Wonderful person.
And they added that syncopated beat to the blues. I mean, they kind of were the originators of that.
Yeah, Clyde and Jabo absolutely did that, man. And there were other cats, man. James Gasson was one of those guys. Because Gasson did, I think he watched 103rd Street Rhythm Band.
Absolutely.
I mean, that was some of Gasson's funkiest stuff.
And he was singing on those tunes too. He just didn't know.
One of their hits. And I heard the story was that Charles Wright copywrote the song, and he's got paid, and James didn't get paid.
Well, we just vetted that last month.
It was Loveland was the song, and James sang it, man. James was saying, I bet you he's singing the blues now, because as we get older, we do the stuff that's comfortable.
Well, you go check. I'll send you that video because he was singing the tune that was the hit record with the
That was Loveland.
Exactly.
I've heard all about Loveland, all of its wonderful charm. And if I ever get to Loveland, wrapped up in your arms,
You know, yeah, that's it.
take me with you. Yeah, James sang the hell out of that. I was like, man, who is that? That's James. That's a drummer. I said, wow. And that inspired me to want to sing, man. Hearing James and there was a group, Rare Earth. You remember those guys? The drummer sang. Maurice White, Marvin Gaye was a drummer. Teddy Pendergrass was a drummer. So a lot of great singers came from the drums. As a matter of fact, Chester Thompson saw me with my band a couple of years, about 3 years ago. We were playing in the park, man, and he saw me get up off the drums and go out front and sing, and he said, oh, I get it. I said, what? He said, you want to sing. I said, well, I love to sing. I've been wanting to sing since I was a kid. He said, but I get it now. You want to sing. And I had never thought about it that way. So, yes, I do. I love being able to. It's been a learning experience for me to come out front. Because when you go to the front of the stage, there's a responsibility that I wasn't aware of.
And what's interesting is that I'm surprised you weren't aware of it, considering that your mom beat into you religiously to play for the singer.
But my mom sang from behind the piano, and she didn't like coming out, because I booked a gig for her out here one time at the Garden City, and I hired a piano player, Smith Dobson, a great piano player. I said, Smith, I want you to play behind my mom. And she was very uncomfortable, because she was used to playing for herself, and there's certain things that she needed to hear that she only one that could do it. So there's a lot of things, just like Elton John. I mean, he plays for himself. Aretha played for herself in the studio. You look at Aretha Atlantic session, and Aretha was at the piano, singing her ass off and playing, because she was from the church and she played piano. And there are a lot of singers like that. And to me, those are some of your greatest singers, because they know music. You know, just an out front singer or somebody that's just a singer that doesn't really know music, it's a little more difficult. If you know music and you understand rhythm,
Right.
It makes for a much.
Well, that's what Chester was saying to you. You've always wanted to sing, but you have that internal rhythm, and you can sing. I mean, this Latin cruise you were just on. I mean, Jorge Santana's tuning in. I mean, Malo was on that tour.
Malo was on the tour. Renee and Renee, a war tribute band.
Not the Lowrider band, though.
No, that's how
Harold and Howard and
yeah,
Lee
no,
Oscar.
No, this is Cisco Kid. These are some local guys, man. They're pretty good too. And Lee Oscar was there. Man, I didn't know Lee Oscar was as bad as he is on the harp, man.
And you want to talk about spontaneous? That cat. So I mean, Rico had him in his studio, and he was listening to a drum track, and Lee Oscar was like, "Yo, can I play on that?" He whipped out the harmonica and just started blowing. That turned out to be one of the tunes on the album.
Yeah, man. Lee Oscar, and he's a really nice guy, man. I ran into him on the elevator, man. I said, man, aren't you Lee Oscar? He said, yeah. I said, who are you? I said, man, I used to tour with you guys all the time back in the 70s. What band? I said, I used to play with Tara. He said, oh. I said, Ronnie Beck. He said, hey, man, I remember you. And then Harold was there, and I said, Harold, what's up? Me and Harold kind of kicked it a little bit when we were touring back in the day, both drummers. Harold's a great drummer, too, man.
Oh, I've a badass. I mean, and so can you talk about the how salsa and funk go together so well?
Well, it's dance music. That's the thread. Salsa is about dance. Funk is about dance. Salsa is just a Latin influenced dance music. And salsa, what is from Cuba, right? And also it has Brazilian influence.
Clave goes back to Puerto Rico, all the island, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, and it's all about the dance, because man, there's people and all ethnicities of people will go hear a salsa band because they want to take the girl to go dance. It's all about dancing. I mean, it's about same thing with funk. If you watch old episodes of Soul Train, you can see they were dancing.
People were having it was not like staged. People were
It
getting.
was all spontaneous, but dances were created because of the music. The music, and I experienced that as well, man. When I was playing at the Black Night and at the Fox, man, especially when we would have a dance contest, and then they would give me a drum solo. I was like, what the hell am I gonna do? They're out there dancing. So I learned how to solo in time and just play the funk and keep the beat so that they could dance to it. And pretty soon, people were dancing to what I was playing on the drums. I mean, it worked like that. People feel the drums.
Yeah, I think there's. How long did it take you to figure out? To play a drum solo that people can still dance to.
Well, it didn't take me that long because I like getting the solos, and if I wasn't able to figure it out, I wasn't gonna get no more drum solos. I said, oh, I like this, well, let me. And I found out what worked, and I was watching people and I wasn't trying to play a lot of stuff. I was playing the groove, staying in the pocket, and just watching the dancers. Then I throw something in, and then I see somebody go with me. I said, hey! So it was like a conversation. And I loved it, man. And it was, that was something that John exposed me to, man. He let me have it with people on the dance floor, and that doesn't happen a lot.
You went back in the late 80s and early 90s to study what the blues drummers were doing on a lot of Muddy Waters tunes, and it was invigorating to you. And what was exciting about that is that, we're always learning, and you decided to go back and listen to that stuff and woodshed on it. Maybe
I had to.
Why did you have to?
Because I wasn't raised listening to blues. I had friends, man. A very good friend of mine is gone now. A guy named Hosher Wright, man. He played with.
Well, he's an Omaha cat, right?
He's an Omaha guy. He was originally a bass player, and then he switched to guitar. He was a great guitarist and a great bass player. But you go over to his house, we were kids, and his mom and stepdad had blues on. All day, and the real stuff. Lightning Slim Hopkins, Muddy Waters, Screaming Jay Hawkins. The guys, the real blues. And I didn't know that because my grandmother was the head of our household, and she thought the blues was the devil's music.
Devil's music, sure.
Yeah.
She wasn't the only one that thought that.
No, but as she got older, she started to appreciate it.
She started to loosen up a little.
My grandmother liked James Brown, okay?
I dig.
I was like, she kind of like, matter of fact, in the 60s, when they first started saying, man, that's funky, my grandmother hated it when we said that. I don't like that. Don't say that.
Don't say that word.
It's funky. Don't say that. She didn't like saying black. She didn't like boys letting their hair grow, afros and stuff. So there was a transition from the old school to the 60s and the revolution and black power and all that. So there was a transition with the matriarchs and the patriarchs of the African or the American African family to these new terms and ways of referencing our culture, our American culture.
American African culture.
There you go. And she got it. She said, finally she got used to us calling stuff funky, and she got used to us calling each other black, because you couldn't call yourself black. If you was black, that meant you was dark skinned and you were less than. And that's some slavery bullshit. But
that's right.
That all changed, man, and it's still changing and evolving, man. Some of that history really needs to be imparted on the youth or to the millennials so that they know where this came from, because it was a couple of generations removed.
Well, and there's been some links in the chain that have been broken. I wonder about just the idea. How do you think that's the best way to convey that history? Is it just through stories that we're talking about right now? Is it just how do you get? I think more than anything else. You don't ever consider yourself a victim. You fight through all sorts of health issues. You're still burning on the bandstand all the time. But how do you convey wisdom and what came before so that the conversation, as we talk about in music, can continue to, it's an evolving history. It's evolving. So how do you impart that aside from just playing on the bandstand, especially with your students and just younger cats who are curious and seekers?
Well, the way I do it is I try to relate it in a way that they can understand. I try to give examples and try to show them what happened and relate it to what's happening now.
Can you give an example?
Well, this is not really music related, but just in the workplace.
Interesting.
Now, when I was a kid, we were taught as black kids that you got to be twice as good to get half as much. I don't know if you've heard that term before.
No, that's another term that you just threw out there.
Yeah, well, that's...
And I understand what it means.
Yeah, my grandmother and the older people would say, you got to be twice as good to get half as much. And that's still, it's like what women are fighting for right now, man, equal pay. You know, there's guys making twice as much as women doing the same doggone job. So, I mean, it translates, and that's how I relate it to, okay, this is what was said in the 50s, but it's still true today in the new millennium. So I just try to relate to my youngsters and young people the connection between what was said then and the value of what was said then and the true meaning and the depth of what was said. Because in the old days you said a little bit and it meant a lot. Nowadays everybody likes to talk. I like to talk and over-explain, and pretty soon you're boring and nobody's listening to you anymore. Back in the old school days, man, they would say one or two sentences, man, and it was like a paragraph.
If you talk to American African students or seekers, are you telling them you have to be 3 times as good to get half as much? I mean,
No, I don't tell them that. I just tell them to be good and be aware of where they are and who you're dealing with, because everybody doesn't think like that.
Well, especially when you're young. I mean, you don't, you know.
Well, everybody and the gatekeepers, a lot of times are still embedded in that old school mindset.
Exactly.
What's happening now, and that's what we're trying to get rid of in Washington right now, because all of the corruption and all that stuff is going. I mean, that's been going on for centuries.
I don't know if it's corruption.
No, it is corruption.
Well, no, but I would refer to it as white power.
It's corruption. There's black guys in Congress that are corrupt.
Yeah, but in 100 years, Congress is going to be East Indian, Chinese, Middle Eastern, and white. It's going to be a wild democracy. Who knows what it's even going to look like?
Well, it's going to look like what the rest of the country looks like. The Republican Party doesn't look like what the country looks like. I mean, what does the country look, especially in California, man? Look around California, man. You see all ethnicities, global.
Not Bakersfield, but Oakland and Alameda,
Well,
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
talking
I
about,
dig. I know what you're saying. No, you're
in
right.
the urban areas and the populated areas, man. Here in San Jose, man, it's crazy. And it wasn't always like this. I got to see that transition, man.
I know. And you got to see the leaders that you looked up to murdered.
Well, that's true. But what I noticed was that the people that get power in that society are the ones that do have a strong cultural connection, like the Vietnamese come over here, man. Dude, they're not trying to embed themselves in the white community. They have their own community. They got their own money. They service their own people, and they're building their wealth and their status in the community from within. And as American Negroes, we were taught that we had to integrate and had to blend in order to get status.
Right.
That's not necessarily true. I mean, most other ethnicities in the United States has their own cultural and communal strength.
Absolutely.
In the population. The Indians, they have the Vietnamese, the Latinos or Hispanics, the African Americans are starting to get there. Like you go to places like Atlanta and stuff and you see black people in Chicago that are doing things. You know, it's still a lot yet to be done, but it's starting to happen.
It's interesting because you used to have in places like Tulsa, you know, or the Fillmore District, you had all black businesses. It was all black commerce. You had barbecue joints everywhere, barbershops, clubs. It was all black owned. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, the Negro or the black has to integrate itself into white America. I think one reason the Latinos, a lot of Latin people take a lot of flack about, you know, this whole, I was just in Napa, and those cats are the cats that are in the fields, picking the clusters, cutting the grass out from the vines. Those are jobs that Americans don't want to do. And those cats are doing it prolifically. And all I say to myself is that they are proud of their cultural heritage too. So they don't like to assimilate all the time. And that bothers white people very, very much.
Well, because, you know, that was one of are flaws in what Martin Luther King was talking about.
Interesting.
Integration, man. And whereas Malcolm X was talking about segregation, he said, no, we need to build our own communities and develop our own wealth and our own status within our community. Then we can integrate.
How have you always, as a people, remained far from perfect, but at the same time, you see this brutality, you see this injustice, but yet everywhere you go, the biggest entrepreneurs have always been American Africans or going back to the motherland. And is it just the security of knowing that you guys are on the cutting edge of a lot of creativity and entrepreneurialism? Because it's amazing to me the amount of cultural bias that you have faced and continue to face in today's time. It was very overt back in the 50s and 60s. Black bathroom, white bathroom, different schools, busings. And now it's more like, well, we have to suppress the vote. We have to make it harder for people to vote. It's more sinister, it's more covert. And yet through it all, you don't see huge violence by American Africans.
Well,
you see it against their own people.
And that is a result of drugs.
Right. And gangs and yes.
And it's all, and we're in a capitalist society, and it's all about money. Everything on this planet, this global economy now, is about money.
Right.
And
the greed factor is very high right now.
Well, it crosses ethnicities, man. If you got money, they don't talk to Oprah like that, because she's the richest sister on the planet. Oprah's like queen. They're trying to get her to run for president. And that's because of her status, her monetary status, man. And it's all about money, man. That's this whole society, man. One thing I will say that you touched on earlier is the creativity that comes out of the black community is a result of our oppression.
Unpack that, please.
Well, because we were told we couldn't do things, we weren't allowed to do this and allowed to do that, so we found ways to do it anyway.
I love it.
It's still developed. In the music especially, man. From the cotton fields and stuff, and they were signaling, we would have secret meetings and secret organizations, the Underground Railroad, and all these things that were happening throughout history. We still established an American African culture. People from Africa in America that were robbed of their African heritage, so we had to create our own heritage. And there's, through that oppression and through the need for stealth to develop our own culture and history, out of it grew this incredible music and art and creativity and all of these things, that sports that we could do, that if the powers that be had anything to say about it, that wouldn't have happened. But they couldn't stop it. Just like hip hop, man. Hip hop is embedded globally. And nobody knew it. When the 80s, when it came out, nobody had a clue, oh, this is a passing fad.
That's what Bill Summers said. He goes, it was just, this will be done in 5 years, and it's still just burning away.
No, it's huge.
The wildfire.
It's huge, internationally. You listen to music from India, music from China, music from the Philippines, music from other parts of the world, you hear hip-hop. Hip-hop influence, even in American music, that's where smooth jazz, hip-hop influenced jazz.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to wrap my head around that, because I can't.
Listen to smooth jazz.
I can't.
I don't really listen to it either.
I just listen to Kabuki Wookie, man.
but my point is,
the rhythms came out.
The rhythms came from hip-hop culture, and they just playing instrumental, playing saxophone or piano or guitar over these hip-hop beats, and now they call that smooth jazz, and that's really what it is. But then I have no problem with that, because it's ours. We made it up.
First instruments were created in the motherland. The first universities were from the motherland. There is so much there, intellectual property, creative property, and just sort of, it's fascinating it is interesting that you were told to integrate and to be good people, to integrate into a white society, when in fact Malcolm X was not talking about that at all. But But
see, that goes back to Europe, the imperialism. England, Portugal, and Europe, man. The Europeans were imperialists. They wanted to conquer the world. England had a bunch of property all over the world. Portugal, all these different countries in Europe wanted to control the world. Imperialism. And after World War II, that had to change. Churchill was not happy when Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, man, you're going to have to give up some of this stuff, man. We want Europe to be free. And Russia wanted to take over Europe after they defeated Hitler. So, I mean, it's always about property and money. It's really all about the money, man. The whole society.
It's all about the money.
You can't deny it, man. It's blatantly evident everywhere you look.
I know.
It's just unavoidable. And that's okay. I mean, I'm never going to have that kind of money, but I can still find some measure of happiness and joy in my life.
Well, I mean, that's what I wanted to ask you about, is the power of rhythm as communication as opposed to the voice. The going back to the motherland, where you had all these people that were playing patterns that related to spiritual callings. It's time for going here. This is a ceremony for the animals. Okay. So it was very much inclusive. It was not the voice. It was the rhythm. And I wanted you to talk about the power of rhythm as a language, and if it is more powerful than the voice. Because like you said, we could be babbling on here, right? And people tune out. But then you start playing a groove, and people are all of a sudden like that.
Well, and from that perspective, yes. But the voice is important, too, because people can speak in cadences and can tell. I mean, that's what made Martin Luther King so powerful.
Right.
When he spoke, there was a cadence, and there was a rhythm to the way he spoke. So when the two are married, they're equally as powerful. Yes, the rhythm is probably number one, but voices too. It's just a matter of what's being said. And rap, look at rap. Rap is rhythm. That's why these kids love rap, because it's rhythmic talking. It ain't singing, it's rhythmic talking. I mean, and it's incredible what these guys are doing, man. They're doing some seriously complicated rhythms with their voice. So they've joined the two, the voice and the rhythm. There's your hip hop, there's your rap. And we see what that's done, and that's rhythm, lyrics with rhythm.
Hopefully human rhythm, too.
Absolutely.
Not just loops. But I got to jump on a plane soon, but I wanted to just talk to you about probably one of your greatest mentors, and a guy who, I've never met him in person, but he's been a big spirit on this trip, and I love him dearly. You recently had a gig paying homage to John Turk, and I wanted you to talk about what he has meant to you as a big brother and a mentor in music and just life in general.
John's greatest influence on me was in the music side of it, him and Clifford both, Clifford Colton. John, especially from the R&B side and from the rhythmic side, the funk side, and the power that the rhythm has, he helped me to understand the power that was within me and helped me to develop and learn how to use that power. Because all of us have some power. It's a matter of whether you can find what that is and culture, nurture it.
And get it out of your system in a positive way.
And you learn how to use it, because it's usable.
Right, that's right.
And John, definitely, John was very patient with me too, because man, I was crazy when I was...
I'm sure you were, because you talked about, you were like any other cat. You wanted to just fashion your chops.
Well, I mean, when you're young and you're discovering that you have potential, you want to get it out as soon as you can.
Right.
And sometimes you try to find shortcuts and stuff like that. And John was one of the ones that said, no, man, you got to learn to do it the right way. And my mom was like that too. She said, no, you guys got to learn to do it the right way. Because we didn't know the right way. Because even nowadays, man, there are all these shortcuts out there, American Idol and The Voice and all. I mean, that's shortcuts. Dude, a friend of mine, Larry Batiste, said, hey, there's no elevator to success. You have to take the stairs. And I absolutely agree with that. And that's what I try to teach my students and young people that I talk to. It's like, hey, there aren't really, because if you do get shortcuts, you miss something.
Or if you just pick up on something, but you don't really, or you're on the edges of it, but you don't get right deep into it. The question I would ask is, how many flights of stairs are there?
There's really only one flight of stairs. it could be 200 stairs on that flight. You know, it could be the stairway to the Great Wall of China. Was it 1,000 stairs?
That's just one long stairwell.
That's what I'm saying.
But Chester and Clifford showed up at this gig for John.
Yes.
You played at a seafood joint.
Yes.
And
it was a seafood restaurant. It wasn't a joint. It was a really
wasn't a
nice
joint.
place.
It was a seafood restaurant.
Yeah, nice place.
And
just clarify that, sir.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just a juke joint, beer joint. I'm sorry into that sort of. It was the seafood. It was upscale.
It was upscale.
It was upscale, but yeah. What is John Turk's legacy to the Oakland music scene?
John Turk Bump.
Gaylord Birch coined that, or everybody had their own little name for it. But once you saw him bump, you knew where the groove was, and then that's all he wanted.
There's no doubt about it. If you weren't there, you weren't in the pocket. You weren't in the groove. John's contribution, because John was kind of a wordsmith too. He even had little sayings and things in short.
A little poetry.
It was kind of poetic, but it was more prophetic.
Yeah.
Just little things that he would say that were like, oh, you know, like words of wisdom, you know, and it wasn't like a whole lot of words. It was maybe 4 or 5.
I love people like. Can you give an example? You have any?
I was just trying to think of.
Yeah, I know. I really, because I love the
say.
people that say Vassar Clemens, the great fiddle player, was the same way. He would say 6 words, and it was the most profound and coolest thing you've ever heard in your life.
Absolutely, and John was one of those. I'm trying to think.
Well, we might have to just do it in part 3. You know, I mean, listen. The bottom line is maybe.
Well, y'all have to dig up, and I have to talk to some other people because you can talk to me, you can talk to Larry Van, you can talk to anybody that knew John Turk. We used to call them Turkisms. John was
Turkisms. Let's start building a book of Turkisms for that cat so he can read them.
We definitely need to. I need to talk to his wife. I need to just talk to some people that knew John, and just think about some of the stuff he used to say.
Well, peanut butter and jelly with Johnny Talbot. We got so much more to do with Ronnie Beck, but before I go, can you just pepper the audience with a little more rhythm, the universal language of rhythm before
man,
we?
I got a gig later on today, man. You trying to wear me?
I'm gonna wear you down. You got stamina, dude. Yeah. Right. Ronnie Beck on the Jake Feinberg Show. Last station on the line.
This is a beat that actually I did a song in the early 2000s, and Fred Wesley did the horn arrangement on, and it's called Jump Ball. And I just started the beat, and Rusty Allen was on the bass, Greg Kroc was on guitar, my brother Donnie was on the organ, and it was just a rhythm section. And I just started playing this beat. We were in the studio. Next thing I know, Rusty came up with this sick bass line, and then Greg started playing this funky ass guitar part, and my brother was just like chomping the organ. It was like, oh my God. So we recorded it, and then the producer said, hey man, I'm gonna put some horns on there. I said, well, call Fred Wesley, and we flew Fred out, and Fred killed it. Jump Ball.
Jump Ball. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you all in a little bit. Peace, Ronnie.